place just 2 years after her ordeal, and the memories of what she had witnessed were still fresh in her mind. One of those memories was of witnessing the murder of another prostitute, apparently as part of an extreme pornographic video, and being warned by the men who controlled her that she too could face the same fate. He went, "Watch it if you don't win the money," he said. "That's what will happen to you," he said. "You were a 50,000 contract to me, and," he said, "if you don't make that money, I'll put you in a movie like this and," he says, "I can make $1 million off you." At the end of the interview, tears streaming down her ravaged face, and with gulped pauses between her words, caused by emotion almost too powerful to watch, Sarah Forsyth somehow summoned all her strength to spell out, clearly and chillingly, what her ordeal had done to her. "I went from being a nursery nurse to that, and now my life is ruined. Everyone knows. Sarah was a prostitute." 10 years later, I knew we had to find out what had happened to her. But Sarah wasn't easy to track down. She had, it seemed, disappeared from the face of the earth, and I feared that she must have succumbed to the fate that seemed almost inevitable back in 1997. The lonely, miserable death of an incurable drug addict. But as the weeks wore on, tantalizing snippets of news came through. Glimpses of a woman on the streets of towns and cities across the northeast who might have been Sarah, or reports to police and social workers which suggested she had at least been alive, if not altogether healthy, within the previous 2 years. And finally, after many more weeks of diligent inquiries by one of the production team, Sarah was tracked down to a flat less than a mile from her original neighbourhood. She looked immeasurably better than I had feared, and in some ways she had come a long way from the girl whose traumatized face and body I'd last seen on the Cook Report videotape 10 years earlier. But appearances can be deceptive. Sarah was a long way from being either safe or better, and it would take many weeks of gentle, diligent work by every member of the team before we all felt she was strong enough to talk. Throughout that spring and summer of 2007, I began to get to know Sarah Forsyth. Gradually, I became reassured that she had managed to put behind her the worst of what had been inflicted on her, and was starting to take control of her life once again. Though I remained uneasy about whether the future would be as trouble-free as she plainly hoped. But what really shone out was Sarah's determination that her story should be told. Not for catharsis or as some kind of vindication, but because she knows the reality of sexual slavery today. Knows just what the thousands of women trapped in British brothels are being put through, and wants the world to listen. And so, at Sarah's request, this book is dedicated to them, and to the victims of sex trafficking, whoever, wherever they may be. Introduction. More than anything, it was the dogs. There were 2 of them. Bull mastiffs, sat on the other side of the door, day and night. I was locked in anyway, but if I even tried the handle, the dogs would bark wildly, and I knew that within seconds someone would be there to check on me. I was scared of the men who came running to the door of that shabby, dirty, miserable flat, but most of all, I was terrified of the dogs. I knew what they could do, would do, given the chance, if the men let them at me. Afterwards, that's what no one seemed able to grasp. "Why didn't you run away?" they asked. "Surely you must have had some chance to escape." But the dogs were always there. Between them and the men and the drugs they fed me day in, day out, till I didn't know which way was up, and I'd reached that terrible place where I needed them as much as I hated them, there wasn't a hope, really. They knew that.